The Zoom is being recorded, so if that folks that are on Zoom, if you don't want to have your video on, that's totally understandable. And just understand that as you're asking questions, sharing stories today. If it's something that you're not comfortable with, feel free to. You can share a story with a neighbor. You can share a story with me. You can share a story with Rosalia, who's one of our staff that's here today. Annette, who's staff at the front desk, and perhaps might be a little awkward that way, but we don't want that to be something that keeps you from speaking today. But we do want to support you because you could not make it today that would like to see this. And then also, I imagine there could be some things shared today that I want to try and remember. And so that's the recording. Before we begin, I have a land acknowledgement that I would like to share. This is written by Rebecca Gonzalez-Mitchell, who is a library board member. And just as a preface, we do this because genuine healing relationships start with being able to look beyond ourselves and our own self-interest. We want to honor and recognize the land and the experience and realities of others. A land acknowledgement is only a superficial step in the hard work of seeing the experience and other indigenous nations. It is only a step to understanding and our own relationships. We want to acknowledge that we live, work, and gather on unceded land. This land is the home of the Apache Tiwa and Tiwa ancestors for 10 years. The people of these communities have stewarded this landscape since long before national claims to this territory were made and colonized by Spain, Mexico, and the United States. As they did in the past, they will continue to witness and close and remember that we are all presently experiencing the keeping our lives on their ancestral land. We recognize the vibrant indigenous communities of northern New Mexico and the connection successful with these communities as individuals, as an organization, and as a community. For some of us, they are not only our neighbors, but they are part of our family. The acknowledgement of the land we gather on, the history of the people, and our current relationships with the Apache Tiwa and peoples serve the dialogue and work of the Embudo Valley Library today. Before we begin, we also want to acknowledge the flooding that has occurred and continues to occur not only in our valley, but also for the people of Orange and counties, as well as others. We recognize the connection we feel as a result of our own recent flooding. We recognize the ways that wildfire and floods have caused enormous loss and displacement for our neighbors. Loss of homes, farms, caves, gardens, livestock, firewood, wildlife, ways of life, and sewage. Sorry, I'm a crier, y'all. Wildfire and flooding have impacted their livelihoods and generational impact. We are mindful of all those barriers to access to resources, and it's the sense that so many people are needing at this time. People space for the collection process that both are comfortable sharing, that is what we want to start with, and that's what we want to priority to part of this. As we all have this conversation, I just want to say that it's important to recognize that every single person that's here is welcome and is a part of our community and is someone that we care for and respect. And so if you hear something that maybe you don't agree with or struck you a little bit the wrong way, I ask you give them some understanding and compassion, and just understand that their lived experience might be different than yours, and that there's room for that. It's totally okay if someone's opinion or experience is different than what
you need to step towards here. They can't
hear me. Okay. So please be kind and compassionate and listen with empathy, and then if you're not, if you do have questions, just be curious, express them with curiosity, and I think that we'll have a really productive dialogue if we can all do that. The purpose of this meeting is there's a lot of purposes. I think there's a lot that can happen here today. But mainly our goal is to start having a community conversation just to bring everyone together. But also through that, we're already strong, we're already resilient, but we can increase that. We can build more strength and more resilience as a community. We can learn how to better help each other. I think it's also, we also have a lot of folks here who have been working very hard. And even some of us personally have been working very hard to try and figure out what should we do? What should the county do? What should our Sakias do? What should, our state do? And so on and so on. And they have all been working hard as well. And so it's an opportunity for us to learn about what has already been done and what actions have been taken, but also to find out what's next. What happens after that? What does this process look like? What can we expect going forward? How long does it take? All of those things. And to just to be able, so as a library, it's important for us to be able to gather that information here, and that information now currently resides in individuals, and to share that information with all of you so we can all have a better understanding and make better decisions based on that. The library is also very interested in learning how we can better support all of our community members and all of our community leaders, our folks here from Rio Arriba County, our New Mexico Acequia Association, our local regional Acequia Association, all of our fire department. That is something that's very important to us. Before we begin, and I'll stop talking, I do want to say thank you to Steve Jennison from the Volunteer Fire Department who helped me arrange this. I want to say thank you to Paula Garcia, who is attending today. Thank you so much. We have Alfredo Montoya from Rio Arriba County, who's our fire chief and director of emergency services. Is that right? Okay. And then also we have James Martinez is here, our county commissioner. Thank you for being here. We have Susan Herrera here, who is our state representative. Really appreciate you being here. It's a state representative for most of us. Roger Montoya wished to be here. He's in Washington, D.C. today. We're expecting Leo Jaramillo, if he's not here already, to join us at some point. He's in Santa Fe and he has a meeting that's supposed to end at 1. So he was or maybe, hopefully, so he was hoping to join via Zoom. He might pop in. And I'm guessing I'm forgetting some very important people. Kathy Underwood from the Embudo Valley Safety Association is here as well. I know they've been part of it. So thank you all. I really appreciate every single one of you for being here. And so now, if anyone is comfortable talking about the flood, that's a super awkward segue. But we did have quite a few community members that were impacted all summer long. These floods started in June, maybe? And so it wasn't just what happened, 3 weeks ago or 3.5 weeks ago now. It's been happening all summer, and we may not even know that. So if anyone would like to talk a little bit about what has happened for them with the flooding, and this is going to help us all understand how we're impacted and how we can help, then you are invited to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'd like to go first.
Sure. Who is this?
This is Marianne.
Sinha.
Yes.
Okay. It's going to be really hard for us to hear you. But if it's okay, I'll try and parrot some of the things that you're saying.
Okay, and I'll try to speak louder if I can. Okay, so my first impact with flooding happened on June 6th. We came back from a motorcycle ride and we saw that it had rained a lot over here. We saw that there was water. I live off of County Road 65, right across the bridge in, I guess it's called the Bosque. And so in our yard, there was like almost 2 feet of water in my yard.
Marianne, can you hold on just a second? I'm gonna try and repeat some of what you're saying, because the folks that are here cannot.
Okay.
So she's saying that on June 5th, they returned home from a motorcycle ride, and they found 2 feet of water. And
in my yard.
In her yard.
Yeah. Yeah. It didn't go into the house. I live in a modular house, and so it was lifted above the ground with some those cinder blocks.
Okay.
So it didn't
go
get
into her house.
No.
Give me one sec. She lives in a modular house that's lifted up off of the ground. Okay, go ahead.
But it did get into my sheds and into my well house.
Okay.
And
it got into her shed and into her well house.
And it contaminated my well. And
contaminated her well.
Yeah. And now my well, it turns out, is like a shallow well, I guess they call it. I'm finding all this out new because I never paid it attention before. I've never had a well before, so never gave it much thought. So it did contaminate the well, and then the mud from the water got into the well machinery, I guess, the tank that holds the water. It got into that. And
give me one second, I'm going to share that. So the water contaminated her well, and she found out that she has a shallow well, and she's learning a lot about her well right now. And it got into the machinery of the well and into the tank.
Correct.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, so after we waited for the water to go down, I started mudding things out of the well house because it was full of mud. And that's when I learned about the shallow well, the fact that it's a shallow well. So of course the mud and everything was inside the well too. So I didn't pay it any more thought, thinking I'm going to give some more time for it to dry out and everything should be okay. Of course, we can't drink the water or anything like that right now. But then the next time it flooded, it wasn't that bad. I had gotten some sandbags, and so I put it around the sandbags around the well. And the second flooding wasn't as high, so it didn't really do too much to the well or to my property. It just got it all wet again, with the river water. So the mud was
So
back.
let me go ahead and share that if I can remember it right. So she didn't think much about it. And they didn't have water, but they thought they would just give it a little time to let the well dry out. They put some sandbags around it to try and protect it. And then it flooded again.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. And then this time, the second flood wasn't as bad. So it didn't get into the well house. But it did get mud back into the mud and stuff back into my yard. Then it flooded again this last time. And that was the worst one. That's the one where I think my neighbor's wood pile got thrown aside. It broke open my fence. It brought branches and some kind of piping, like a sewage pipe from someplace. And that was the worst one. And that one seemed to be the one that really got to my well. It just, because I had sandbags, but I had sandbags that were like, when you stand them sideways, they're like, what, a foot or so, something like that. Anyway, that wasn't high enough. And I guess the water was just too fast. So it got in again and tore down my fence, a couple of panels of my fence, and got through some trash and stuff to the back, and my neighbor's wood pile to the back, and other people were impacted from this last one, which was the worst one. But that's my dilemma now, is my well. I got mud in my yard. I'm waiting for it to dry because I don't know when it's going to flood again, and I can't afford to have somebody come every time it floods and goop up the mud. So I got this dry pottery looking mud in my yard. My well is pretty much defunct, and I just need to know how I'm going to be able to get it all back in order again. What steps I need to take, and that's and I know I'm not the only one that went through hell because of this, and I want to see what other people are doing to kind of lift themselves out of the mess we're in. I appreciate you letting me talk.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So it flooded, in case you didn't catch that, it flooded a third time on her property, and that was the worst one. Her well is now basically defunct, and she's really wondering if there are ways that she can, if there's any help for her to get her well working again, because every time it floods, she doesn't have the resources to be able to muck it out and then get the well back in operation. Was that a fair representation of what you shared, Mary?
That was very fair. Thank you.
Awesome. We're going to try and plug in a speaker. Brilliant. Okay. Hey, Mary, can you say something really quickly? And we're going to test the speaker that we just plugged in.
Okay. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm anxious to hear what everybody else has to say too. Very anxious. I've been looking forward to this meeting for so long. Excellent. And thank you for putting it together too.
Yeah. Tiny bit better. Okay. So Yeah, I apologize for the technical challenges for amplifying the folks on Zoom, but we're gonna work with it a little bit. And then if anyone else on Zoom wants to share verbally, you're more than welcome to. It's a little hard to hear you guys, but I'm happy to, repeat after you. Occupy style, and then and we also have a speaker hooked up now that is a little bit better, but not great. You're also welcome to share in the chat. Bob.
Reach now, just in specific to this person. Yeah, it might not be worth a while at all to try and do anything with her well until we're past the season, because 3 times means 4 times. But what I noticed the first time that I came through town, actually on my way to your house, after the flood 3 weeks ago, was that it looks to me like we have a very inefficient system of getting the water to the river. It's going to keep coming down the arroyos, and they're not working efficiently to get the water directly to the river. They're being diverted in too many places. Sometimes because culverts are backing up because they're undersized. And sometimes because people are putting junk in the arroyos. I know.
So I'm gonna pause you. I'm so sorry, but if anyone in here decides that they want to say something,
Yeah.
for the benefit of people on Zoom, I hate to do this to make people feel uncomfortable, but can you stand up and stand next to this mic so that they can hear you? I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, they just can't hear you.
Okay. Actually, I can talk pretty darn loud.
Can you guys hear Bob?
Can you hear me?
Yes, much better, much better. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm not going to stand with it. But anyway, I can speak loud. The water system around here is really not well thought out. And that's the biggest part of the movement of water is we need to do some planning. And we need to keep the pathways to the river much better maintained. And some of them need to be wider, some of them need to be a little deeper, some of them need higher banks. But with the climate change, we're going to have to expect that maybe not every year, but certainly more frequently, we're going to have these kinds of events that may last for a week or 10 days or 5 times in a month. It just behooves us to do some serious long-term planning and some more focus on maintaining the way that the water flows down off the hillsides and to the river. That was because otherwise we're going to keep having water flow into places where we don't want it. We need better planning on directing the water. That's just that just overall that was my first impression. Driving through town after the event that happened. What was it, 3 weeks ago? Where you guys lost your driveway. That's just my impression.
Now, how's that going to work, Bob? I like your idea. How's that going to work with the fact the burn scars?
Doing the best I can. I've taken Benadryl, everything, but nothing's working so far. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Susan Herrera. I'm the local representative, and the county just declared to get emergency relief, you have to do certain steps, okay? So the county declared an emergency state of affairs due to the flooding and the fires. It's just been a year. And so they did that on Thursday, which means we're now available for funding from the state. How fast that's gonna move, I don't know. It is easy. I'm not gonna say easy, but money will go to the Acequia Association. So if you're the flooded out your acequia, there's emergency funds that will be available to acequias. You need to know Paula Garcia, because if you haven't already and you're an acequia, you need to contact the New Mexico Acequia Association, because they are helping with the engineering studies and helping with and Paula will explain this later, so I don't want to steal anything you're going to say, but they will help direct money to your acequia in the case of emergency. If you are a mutual domestic water system, again, it's a government agency. And if something happened to you, now we've been declared an emergency county, so we can get money from the state, and this is coming down from the feds. So we will get that money too. And the mutual domestics can get help. I'm just gonna say this because I think somebody should say it. If it's a private individual, okay, you're going to have more problems getting money. I'm just going to tell you, because we have something in this state called the anti-donation clause, which means we can't give to individuals. I mean, that's just state law. I want to tell you that we voted last year, Chris Chandler and Anthony Allison, we ran up against this problem when we were doing the internet funds, right? We realized we couldn't get money to that half mile because of that last mile, because of our anti-donation clause. So we did, and that has to be a constitutional amendment. So we passed legislation, and we included water, and we included internet so that as a state, when we started giving out money, we could give money to that last mile of internet that affects individuals, and we could do help with water. Now, I hate to tell you this too, that's going to be on the ballot next year. Okay, when you pass legislation, then you have to wait for the next, it'll be this election, it'll be on the ballot. Please vote for that. Okay, it's a constitutional amendment to allow the state to give money to individuals who need internet in rural communities and water in rural communities. We now have the legislation in place, but it's not in place yet. When Biden did the infrastructure bill, it was a 3-year plan. So we will be having money. It does take time, you guys. Just because the bill passes doesn't mean it happens right away. So the money is in the loop, okay? But it will take time. And it's going to take time for you to do engineering plans and to see what you're going to do and how you're going to have to prepare it for, I don't know, for the next 20, 30 years. Is water a problem? Is the watershed a problem in this area? Yes, we all know that. I did get $50,000 in money to do a local watershed plan. I'm in the middle of writing legislation now. And what we want to do, and we've had a meeting with we have 4 mutual domestic water systems in this area, just Dixon, Embudo, Apodaca, Candancito, and Rinconada. 4 different water systems for drinking water. What we'd like to do is one system for a clean drinking water system. Okay, so that you don't have to worry about your well anymore. Just so all of you know, I ran out of water a year ago. We've had water for 20 years at 20 feet. Last year, the well went dry. I had to wait a year to get a new well. We've been hauling water for a year. We finally got it in. Cost $27,000 to build a new well. Does everybody in this community have $27,000 to build a new well? I don't think so. Okay, so what we're trying to do is a system that pulls 4 systems together and has clean drinking water for everybody. And then wastewater is a huge problem. All these septics are a huge problem, you guys. There's now technology. Where we can run the pipes, from under Highway 68. You run these horizontal pipes. You can hook up a small, I don't know what you call them. What do you call the plastic pipes that you use for pumping? Thank you. You only have to go 12 inches down. You put in PVC, and then you hook these up to your septic tanks, right? And then I hate talking about this stuff, but the septic tank, you put a grinder on there, and you suck it out for lack of a better word, a more graceful word, but you suck all the waste out of there and then it goes to a treatment plant where we can put on, we all have land around here and get that for free. So what I'm trying to do is write legislation right now. So if you guys want, we will be kind of the model rural community that will have clean drinking water and a wastewater system and taking care of all these issues with the watershed. And for those of us who have been going to these meetings for years now, here's what happened. All this building that we have upstream, what happens is those arroyos used to have little mounds in them with grasses. And so the monsoons would come and the waters would go off to this side. Everybody built along the arroyos, right? That's where they built because that became the road. And so now those roads are flat and dusty, right? Filled with silt. The Embudo River used to hold 3 tons of silt a year. It now holds 20 tons of silt a year. And that's because when those monsoons come, all that just goes right into the river. We don't bury, has anybody caught a fish there lately? There's no fish in the Embudo year now. Years ago, you could catch, 30 years ago, you could fish every day and catch a fish, couple, 10, whatever. I'm just saying, though, we have huge problems because we don't have a watershed organization or an organization. And this is true, not only for this valley, you guys. It's not all about us. It's a statewide problem for rural communities. So what we have to do is regionalize rural waters, okay? Figure out what's going to happen and do that. So I just want to say, if you're an individual and your well went out, even if it was caused by monsoons, if it was caused by an acequia, you might have a chance, okay? If it's caused by, quote, an act of God, and if you're on a floodplain, and there's all these other things going on, you guys, I just don't want you to think that you're going to get reimbursed for that. I hope you do. I'll work on that, but I'm just going to tell you, I don't think it looks good. You have to have something called flood insurance that will cover that. If it's caused by the breakup in a acequia, then you have a chance. If it's caused by a mutual domestic going awry, you might have a chance. I'm just saying that's what I know of the law so far. And I just wanted to say that. And I guess I wanted to talk early because I have another meeting at 2, but I'm going to try to put it off as long as I can. And I'll shut up now. But I just wanted people to know that. And I think we need to hear from Alfredo and Paula and James about what the different agencies are doing.
Thank you, Susan. Rachel?
If we don't have other community members who want to share first, then I'd say leaders, let's go ahead and share. But I did really want to give priority to the community members that are here to share their stories and ask their questions first, if that's okay. Sure, go ahead, Billy. And Billy, are you comfortable standing up and coming close to the microphone so the folks on Zoom can hear? I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I know a lot of houses on this side of the road down here were flooded, like Rachel's and Dorca's, and my husband Scott, our cellar was flooded. And then the water and mud kind of went around behind the back and messed things up, but. I don't know. Okay, well, what I've been concerned about is that there's a lot of people, especially older people, who don't have anybody to help them clean up their messes. You know, we're older too, but luckily my husband's still strong. But we had 3 feet of water to clean out of our cellar, and then the walls started collapsing. 2 of the walls collapsed, and he simply couldn't do it by himself because the buckets were like 60 to 70 pounds heavy. I couldn't help, and it was really hard to find anybody to help. You know, people could come for maybe 2 or 3 hours, and then there's our neighbors who need help. I wanted to go and help Dorcas, but we had such a big mess with our own house. I couldn't even go and help her. So it seems like we need some sort of a trained workforce to be in place to help people, especially elderly people with their houses when it happens, because it's just too hard to find people to hire anymore, you know, and that's for the people that can afford it. So that's just one thing I've been thinking about, like, what do, you know? What's gonna happen if this keeps happening? Because, like Rachel said, her house could take a year to clean up, I mean, a year to get back in shape, and I'm sure Dorcas's will too, and, you know, I don't know all the people that were affected, but that's one thing that's just been on my mind is having some kind of a labor pool, kind of like you have a fire department, people who are, you know, trained and ready and want to do that kind of thing, and maybe there's funding for that. I don't know, but I just wanted to bring it up.
Come on down.
So I wasn't flooded in this event, but in 2006, our house got flooded 4 times in 1 month. So it only came into our house 1 time, but the property around us all got flooded. So my question is, okay, so that was maybe in 2 inches of rain in an hour or something. And then maybe a year or 2 later, around Estes Park in Colorado, they got 6 inches of rain in an hour, and they flooded a lot of villages and towns around there. And so I'm curious, my question is about safety. So if an event like that happens here and we get 6 inches of water in an hour, like, should we go on our roofs? There's only a few ways out of town. Should we try to drive out of town? Which way should we drive if we do that? I just don't know what the safest thing to do in a really more serious situation than we've had what to do. So I'd like that addressed a little bit.
I can address that a little bit. So I don't know how many people are familiar with the community notification system in Dixon with the county. Use this to do our reverse 911 type notifications. So our office coordinates constantly with the National Weather Service for adverse weather events like this to make sure that those types of notifications go out. One of the real important things with that is so there's multiple ways to sign up for that system. You can go in and simply register by taking your cell phone, texting 888-777, your zip code to that number off of your cell phone, and it'll register you. You'll get notifications for that zip code. That's the easiest way, but also the most basic way to do it. I would recommend going in and creating an actual user profile and account. By doing that, you're allowing yourself to have a little bit more control over what types of notifications you receive. Some of those notifications that you can opt to receive are going to be rebroadcasts of messages that the National Weather Service sends out. I think that Chief Jennison here could attest to that. He probably receives notifications very frequently recently with the rains that we've been getting and the thunderstorms that we've been receiving from the National Weather Service. In addition to that, if we expect heavy monsoon rains, oftentimes our office will get notified. It may be 20 minutes before the event. It may be an hour before the event. It's really hard to say, and depends a lot on how closely and accurate National Weather Service is. But I will say that then those types of events, you can rely on instructions from our office to prepare you for evacuation or guide you on evacuation. In the event that we were to have to start doing those types of evacuations, you would be instructed as to locations that you could go that have been pre-set up and or determined by our office and the county to make sure that there is assistance available there for you. Again, of course, that's not always going to be the best situation. Unfortunately, there are times that you may be caught in a flash flood. Again, those important times are absolutely see the highest ground possible. Thank you, Alfredo. If I may, if I can share a little bit
more. So for those that don't know me, my name is James J. Martinez, Rio Arriba County Commissioner and Commission Chairman representing District 1, which includes Dixon and the Embudo Valley, our neighbor Ojos Arco, Truchas, Cordova, Chimayo, Espanola, and Velarde. So my district covers quite a bit of the county. And not only have your communities been impacted by the recent heavy rains, but much of my district has, and county-wide, as a matter of fact. The county has been responsive to these heavy rain events. In June in Ojos Arco, mainly parts of Chimayo, and then more recently here in Dixon and Embudo Valley. I remember on July 27th, I received calls and texts and emails from residents, maybe some of you in here, and the county was responsive. We had personnel on the ground. We had our roads crews here, and they continue to work on making sure that our county roads are in drivable, passable conditions. Our emergency management team was on the ground providing assistance, providing sandbags, and however else the county was able to assist. Like Representative Herrera said, me as Commission Chairman, I called for a special meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, which was held last Thursday, August the 9th, in order to declare a state of emergency for the county of Rio Arriba as it relates to these recent flood events. Now, what that declaration did was set into motion the availability of resources and funding from our state, federal, and other agencies. So let me just, if I may, read just quickly a portion of the actual resolution that was unanimously passed by the Board of Commissioners. And it says, the purpose of this declaration is to authorize the exercise of necessary emergency powers and expenditure of available resources, as well as the requesting and accepting of aid, assistance, relief programs, and funding that may be available from the state of New Mexico, federal government, and other entities. So that was an important step that I took as Commission Chairman in consultation with our county management and our emergency management to put forth this emergency declaration. Now, as the representative said, that will set into motion assistance from the state and other federal agencies. Now, how can the county help directly? So that's what I'm here to speak of. And then if there's any other questions, Alfredo Montoya, our county emergency manager, can answer some of those questions. But we help assuring that county-owned infrastructure, facilities, and county roads are all maintained and repaired. We have been on the ground and we will continue to do so. If there is a portion of your county road that is in need of assistance, please let us know, let me know. I have my business card on that table where it says award-winning books. You can feel free and grab my business card at the end and call me. That's my direct number, my email or text. And I will consult with county management in order to mobilize our county roads crews in case of a road that's in need of attention. Secondly, we will also, as a commissioner, this is my 4th year, and I have been able to provide over $100,000 in special project funding, most of which has gone to local acequias, and many right here in Dixon and Embudo. So as a commissioner, I can, at my own discretion, provide emergency funding to local acequias that are in need of assistance. We have eliminated the red tape, the bureaucracy. We have a simple request for acequia assistance that my office can send to you via email or a hard copy. As soon as I get that request on my desk, I review it, and if appropriate, I approve it for a requested amount of funding. Again, this is an emergency type, a low-level funding that the county can provide almost immediately. I know Paula Garcia is here from New Mexico Acequias Association. She can talk more later about the programs and assistance that her office can provide to acequias as well. We had a question over here?
Yeah, I was just wondering, especially because of what this gentleman said, to what extent the road crews are able to clear out culverts. I appreciate everything you're doing, on one side.
No, good question.
But I think it's really critical to prevent much future flooding.
If there is an acequia that is beneath a county road, it would be the job of our county roads crews to evaluate that culvert.
Yeah, but
As-
it's the road.
So the county will do whatever is within our authority and our responsibility. So if it's a county road, if a culvert crosses under a county road, we'll evaluate that culvert and determine if it needs for unclogging, for lack of a better word, or replacement of that culvert. Acequias, as I said, there's direct funding through me as a commissioner to local acequias. County roads, we have our staff available and ready to maintain those. And whatever other assistance, if you have a specific question or concern regarding your circumstance, please let me know. As commissioner, I believe that I've been available and accessible to the community members, and I plan to continue to do so. But just for the sake of time and to allow others to speak, you can certainly contact me offline after the meeting or whatever it may be, and I'll be happy to answer more questions specifically related to your circumstance. And Rio Reba is here to help. So please let us know how we can be of assistance. And I want to thank Rachel for the invitation and for hosting this event. Thank you all for being here. And again, I'm James J. Martinez, Rio Reba County Commissioner. Please let me know how I can be of help. Thank you.
Commissioner Martinez, one question. We're talking about the availability of on-sporting assistance.
Yes.
That's already in place.
Yes.
Thank you very much for helping our assistance.
Welcome.
Thank you, I've heard of Mongolia. Your position very well responsive. But I have a question, and I think Commissioner Martinez wants to answer it.
Yeah.
You're not, I love Mr.
It's okay.
Martinez.
That's what I'm here for.
You're a teacher, that's right. Anyway, when will the goal get to start applying for funding from the state? Has the governor said that as an executive
Good
order?
question. So we did our part. The county did our part by declaring the state of an emergency. As soon as we signed as commissioners, it was sent to Santa Fe to the governor's office. From there, I don't know if you have any further detail, but the county did our part. Now it's up to the state to do theirs. Okay?
There's still processing that.
So immediately following the commission meeting on Tuesday, our office as well as the manager's office in the county did send the declaration over to Department of Homeland Security, the governor's office. My last understanding on Friday morning was that the governor's order, all of the information that Department of Homeland Security has to send to the governor's office for an executive order had been sent. They were waiting on an executive order to be signed by the governor. Also, if I may just also add to that real quick, is if you are an acequia or organization that is eligible to start applying to the governor, or not to the governor, but to the state for assistance, please do not wait. I've talked with many of the acequias on the phone. Please do not wait. There's no reason to wait until the executive order has been released. Please start that process as soon as you can. Because it's unfortunate, but I'm gonna be honest about this. There were acequias last year that had some flooding. A couple of acequias got completely washed over for multiple miles. And some of those acequias are still waiting to get their relief finalized. So with that, please start that process. So the BLM, and the Army Corps of Engineers don't really have too much, Paul can correct me if I'm wrong here, to do with the actual sections. They're gonna be more so our natural drainage systems, those types of things.
I have a question. I'm wondering, and maybe, Paula, you would be better able to answer this, but this has to do with the safety of spending some of their own money and hoping to get reimbursed. We've been encouraged not to do that by various people who said, you'll never get that money back. On the other hand, if we have to wait a very long time, then we can't get rid of the water surplus answer. Do you have any input on that?
The only thing I can say is that I can encourage you to follow the process that I have been directed to have you follow by Department of Homeland Security Emergency Management. And again, unfortunately, for a speedier process, and even with all their programs, in the end, they are a reimbursement process. There is a cost share match with their relief.
So you might understand then that it is okay to go ahead and spend some of your own money and then get reimbursed.
If you're planning on going after any of the public assistance from Department of Homeland Security Emergency Management, I say yes. However, I would wait also to make contact with somebody from Department of Homeland Security Emergency Management after you have filled out and submitted that application for assistance to make sure that the parts of the projects that you're doing to restore your essentials are eligible for reimbursement. There are certain types or certain categories from Department of Homeland Security Emergency Management that will qualify for reimbursement.
Okay, everyone pause for just one second. I'm so sorry, Paula, but they can't hear right now, so I'm just gonna do a quick. Okay, so the short synopsis of that is that if you're on an acequia and your acequia is applying for money, to wait for the funds to be available because it is a reimbursement process. Make sure that what your acequia is applying for is a reimbursable expense, and there will be some cost sharing. So the acequia will have to come up with some portion of money in fixing these problems. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Paula now, if that feels like a safe short synopsis of what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Now Paula and thank you.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to take this off because I have a low voice. First of all, thank you for the invitation to be here, and my colleague Serafina is here as well, and she'll be working directly with the acequias here in the Embudo Valley. Okay. Okay. So I was introducing Serafina Lombardi. She's my colleague, and she'll be assigned to work in this area. So it won't just be me. We'll have a whole team. We also have another individual by the name of David Manzanares, and he's going out and doing site inspections and assessments, damage assessments of your acequias. So we do have a whole team of people assigned to be supporting the acequias here. And Yolanda's here from our board. She makes the magic happen. But I wanted to affirm what Alfredo Montoya is saying. And by the way, thank you to the county. You've been very responsive. And every time we've had questions, they've gotten back to us. So really appreciate that. This is a very difficult system to work through. I just want to say first that everything that we're seeing was predicted by our climate change scientists. And there's an urgency about this, but we do need to address the immediate disasters and also keep in mind that there's a long-term disaster rolling out over the next several decades. And I encourage you to read the leap ahead analysis for the 50-year water plan, because it really gets into the detail of what's going to happen to our soils. So there's okay, it's like, yeah, it's going to get hotter. Yes, there's going to be less snowpack, but this thing that happens with our soils and all that siltation that's coming from up there, and that's a very hard thing for our future to deal with. So having that watershed view is very important. But that being said, we're here to survive now, and we have to get through this time and adapt. And our most immediate step is how do we, I'm gonna focus on acequias, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. I come from Mora, we're very much in survival mode over there. And, one of the things about going through that disaster is I've learned more about the disaster program. So how fun for me. But that's, take it for what it is. I feel a little smarter as a result of it, but just a little bit. Okay, this is very hard. We're dealing with FEMA over there. This is not FEMA. This is just the state. So the state agency is called Department of Homeland Security Emergency Management, as Alfredo said, and DHSEM for short. And once the governor does the executive order, it will make funding available. And your application is going to be to DHSEM. And it's called the RPA, Request for Public Assistance. And you'll need some detail. And there's different categories. There's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And categories A and B are probably most relevant immediately. One of those is debris removal, taking away sedimentation. Alfredo has copies of that. And so there's a process you go through. There's a person or an email very specific on that form where that it's sent. And you have to give cost estimates for the different elements. And one thing Alfredo said that was very important that I wanted to emphasize is that there's a process you'll go through. When we've been involved in floods in other places, DHSEM will send staff into your community. So someone from the state will come into your community. You'll do a day-long visit with them and go look at the damage. And so you're not all alone figuring this out. You do need to focus on what's eligible. So it should be pretty obvious. It's your immediate, it's your acequia channel, your presa, your head gates, your culverts, anything that's part of your common infrastructure on your acequia, that's what's eligible. There's Kathy. Hi, Kathy. That's the most important first step. And we have heard from some acequias already that have asked for some help. And we have, with Alfredo's help, provided that link to the RPA. So I think there's a big systemic problem with our disaster response in this state and in this nation. It's woefully inadequate, and you're going to get the first row seat to that now. First of all, there isn't a good flood response in our government. We saw in the fire that there's, they can put 3,000 firefighters on a fire, but when it comes to structure protection for a flood, you're like, no one even knows where to get sandbags, and no one knows how to put them, and some of us aren't strong enough to put them. There's a lot of issues, but there's not a really effective flood response. And so I'm sorry to those of you that have had problems with your homes. It's emotionally draining. It's hard to deal with. It's physically challenging. And unless you have flood insurance, it's hard to get help for your homes. That being said, look into flood insurance. I got flood insurance. I didn't have it. I bet you 99% of people don't have it, at least where I'm from. And it was not easy to get it. FEMA gives you a whole list of places to call, but it's really hard. So don't wait till the last minute. And we're going to be seeing floods often. I think this gentleman earlier said, it might not be every year, but we're going to see floods more frequently because of our changing climate. So one of the things that NMA8 can provide is Serafina and our other colleague, David Manzanares, can arrange a time to come and visit your acequia and start to do that damage assessment. So get some cost estimates so that you can put them into your RPA. That DHSEM funding is slow to move. It doesn't, you think they're just gonna cut you a check because you did all your paperwork right? You could do everything right and it still gets caught up in the system. We have an acequia in Tecolote that hasn't been paid back from a flood in 2017. I don't want to like burst anyone's bubble, but this agency is hard to deal with. Any little thing in it trips it up, and staff changes, there's turnover in the agency, and you say, well, this person said this was right. And then the next one comes in, it's like, well, could you do this over again? We need another form. And so it's not easy. But I do think we need to pressure our policymakers to make this process a lot more user-friendly for communities, especially because we're seeing disasters more often. And to have to wait for that long to get reimbursed is very problematic. I can tell you, Mora, we're exploring some different kind of options for how to deal with this, because it's going to be every year. Things like getting together to buy equipment. We have, there's only one that has its own backhoe where I'm from, and they're the only ones that are out there working. The rest are waiting for, FEMA or DHSEM, and it's very frustrating. But the ones that have the backhoe, they started working right away. They took some hand crews, they got the backhoe, and they are going to ask for reimbursement, but they're not going to fall apart if they don't get it, because we're in survival mode, and that's there's a certain grit you have to get to get through those disasters. And we're gonna fight tooth and nail to get those resources out of those agencies, because this is a legit form of the common good, just keeping our society going. So we need to fight for that money, but at the same time, we need to get creative, figure out how we among ourselves collectively pool our resources to take care of ourselves and our basic needs. Sir?
Is there money available for the community here to buy a backhoe, a track hoe actually is what's needed in these kind of things, or more than a backhoe, for common use, so that it can be shared by people, and then also money to train a number of operators for that machinery, because we don't want people who don't know what they're doing driving around in the tractor.
Absolutely. Yeah, it becomes a safety issue, plus the machinery maintenance. The answer to your first question is yes. Capital outlay can be used by acequias to buy equipment. In fact, we have a weekly disaster meeting with the NMAA. I can share that, Kathy can feel free to share it with the acequias. And we just had a case study from Chamizal where they bought a backhoe. They got capital outlay, they bought a backhoe, they bought a shelter for the backhoe. I don't know how they handled the training. So that's another question. I'm not sure how you'd want to handle the training. But it is possible for people to get, for acequias as political subdivisions, to get capital outlay for equipment. I've always approached that with caution, because I always, I know how our acequias are. I trust us, but at the same time, we're volunteers, and there's no written procedures on how we're going to manage this collective equipment. So I feel like we need to have some really good understandings. Anytime you have collectively owned equipment, it's complicated. Just ask any cooperative. So I would say, I think in terms of being forward looking, we should look at that and work together to figure out what would the institutional piece look like for the acequias to share equipment. What kind of policy and procedures would you want? I think starting first with trained operators is the obvious first thing. But I'm sure there's other things, how to store it, who's in charge of maintenance and that sort of thing. So I think that's one thing to think about. And I forgot to mention earlier that we're going to be definitely in this kind of disaster mode on an ongoing basis. And disaster funds aren't going to work to do major overhauls. So I think the DHSEM funding is sometimes limited, and maybe Alfredo knows, how much does the county get for disaster? Isn't it only like $750,000?
It can vary.
Okay, it can vary. Okay, so if we had $1 million worth of acequia damage, do you think DHSEM would cover it? Yeah. We don't know. We don't know, right? So that's the thing. Some of the damages are gonna be so great that Homeland Security might say, look elsewhere. But that there are other programs. In fact, you know, like in our burn scar, we're saying don't rebuild anything for 5 years because the floods are gonna be severe for 2. You don't wanna rebuild and have it wash out again. But even if you are gonna rebuild, let's say your presa gets washed out, it gets damaged. DHSC might not be the best source for that. It's gonna maybe cost you $250,000 or $500,000. That's where the Army Corps of Engineers can come in. They do have a program, but it's not an emergency program. It's not an earth moving program. It's a very specific acequia program. And it doesn't work very well, to tell you the truth. It's a federal program and some years there's money, some years there's not. We're very disappointed with how the Corps is working. So, but it's there. And if our Congress can work on it, I think it would be a nice program. But secondly, there's at the state level, there's the Second Community Ditch Infrastructure Fund. Serafina is the expert in that. Do you want to say anything about the ACDIF real quick?
I would just say, let me know when you're ready
Yeah.
to work on it, but it should be sooner rather than later to start the conversation because it's a lot of preparing to be ready. It's not impossible, but it's a really good process to get organized and know what you need.
Yeah.
We know how to do it. So right now we're working directly with the 3 sectors for the most impact. So, and those 3, everyone knows how to communicate with me. So
Yeah.
I won't bore all of you, but if you want to learn more,
Yeah.
I can tell you more.
Yeah, definitely. So as far as the nitty gritty nuts and bolts, how to get an application prepared, submitted, Serafina is going to be your person.
Hold your hand.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's not even exaggeration. Like we'll go every step. No details too small for us to work through. And sometimes you don't even know you have a question till you're halfway through the process. And then you think, oh, this is my question. So reach out to us and Serafina can work on that. But ACDIF is a state program. It's through the Interstate Stream Commission. And it's actually, the Interstate Stream Commission has been funding acequias for 30 years. But this is a updated version because we passed a statute that dedicated funding. Before it used to be year to year. So there's a dedicated funding stream for acequias each year. And you can apply, there's an annual funding cycle. And usually the deadline's March for the next fiscal year that starts June. But sometimes they open the application process if they don't have enough apps yet. So you have to stay on your toes and talk to Serafina often because she's the on the inside track of the ACDIF. So that's the state program. But definitely we need to be vigilant on this DHSEM process. And if anyone ever wants to know about how I got flood insurance, you can talk to me about that. That's not an acequia specific role, but I feel like people need to know what that's like. And get the RPAs in. And for really big projects, we're going to go through ACDIF. And we'll keep working on it. So hopefully that was helpful. And you've got a really great county support system here. Fela's been great. Your volunteer fire departments have a reputation that is stellar. I'm a little jealous being from Mora, but we're trying hard to. But anyway, have a good afternoon and I'll be here to listen. Thank you.
Right now, what we're talking about is the immediate need to address our acequia issues because of the floods. But they're going to be happening over and over because we have the real culprits up above. And those are the arroyos up above that spilled onto our acequias. Our acequia, for sure, had its headgates closed as a preventive measure because of the floodwaters that were coming in from the river. But there was nothing we could do to prevent the floodwaters from the arroyos up above to spill into our acequia. And that's what caused most of the damage. So what we need now as a community is to hone in and put the pressure on BLM and the federals to establish flood mediation, controls, and reservoirs. And it is possible because Commissioner Martinez, is he around anymore? He's from the Chimayo area. That used to happen a lot in Chimayo when I was just knee high. My father was a teacher there. And houses would just get flooded with their nice carpets, you know, those nice houses that they have. Well, it stopped happening once flood controls were set up. There were reservoirs. David Manzanares and I had a conversation about that the other day. He worked on those reservoirs, those flood mediation measures when he was starting out in his career. So that's what we meant. Otherwise, we're going to have a cycle of insanity. And they're going to say, you know what? Why did you guys live in Dixon when you guys have arroyos up above? They're going to stop even paying attention to us. So that's where the more permanent solution, although we're up against nature, nothing is for sure, but that would certainly help a lot more.
Could somebody, I couldn't hear that good. Could somebody kind of give me a brief synopsis of what she said?
No, but there is a template that we can look into from the Chimayo area that started happening back to the early 70s, I think. And we can talk, I know David's not working on that. We just happened to have that conversation because of what happened here in Dixon. But we can start looking into that because that's where the real solution is. I think.
But 1 second, we do have someone on the Zoom that has had her hand up for some time now.
That's,
Marianne, do you want to share something?
no, I just wanted, so far, I've heard everyone say, you know, climate change and this is going to work. This is something that we're going to have to get used to. But I don't think anybody's mentioned the fact that, you know, the fires have occurred. We have the burn scars. And it seems like that contributed to the flooding that happened because some of this, the water, the first time from my flood, it had this black ash all over the top of it. And so the last time it had just a little bit of black ash, but it was still there. So somehow I'm thinking the ash is coming from the mountains, the burn scars, and that's contributing to the flooding in this area. That's my opinion.
Marianne,
But I'm not a scientist or anything, so.
where do you live? If I
In
may ask.
Off County Road 65, right off the Embudo River.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And it's possible that someone might speak to that coming up here. Lorenz, yeah, come on up. If you could stand up here, that would be super awesome.
Hello, my name is Loren Osen. I'm a commissioner on the Acequia del Llano, right out back. And on the Monday following July 27th event with floods, I'd been out of town and found out about it on Facebook. And as you drove down the road, you may have looked by the American Legion, and there's a huge culvert, half of which is a quarter mile down the wash next door to Rachel's house. And I jumped into action, called just about everybody I could think of on every level. And the first to come out was some individuals from the BLM. And the BLM, basically Mark Lujan, who's been working with them for a long time, said basically these are arroyos, they flood, and we'll look into mitigation measures down the road. We'll take it back and we'll report it. I'll report it to our field office. And Marina Santos, by the way, now who's one of our presidents, works in BLM. And I was thinking that possibly they could do something to slow the water down, as Yolanda was talking about. At the NRCS, Tomas Gonzalez, I think was his name, he came out and said, well, looking up from the American Legion up that wash, you could put in a post, pull across the steel wire, you can do other things that they had done over in Chimayo. But really, they weren't going to offer any immediate assistance. And then I continued to reach out to a number of organizations and individuals while contemplating and dwelling on the fact that there's so much mud in our Acequia that we need, at least, as Brian Worley is a commissioner of the Bosque, we need like 4 limpias just to start digging out. We have so much mud, debris. And so where do we start? Just on the manpower, with the labor. I was thinking, well, National Guard would be sweet. Bring them out a few trucks or a few buses and let them work for a week or two on our sectors. But that fell on deaf ears with Congresswoman Leisure Fernandez's office and Senator Lujan. Instead, the Congresswoman suggested that once we get the governor's executive order, that we look into the NRCS programs. One's called the Emergency Watershed Protection Program, which is more for individuals whose homes have been damaged, roads, infrastructure, etc. And then they have the program through the FSA, which was the Emergency Conservation Program, which was to fix agricultural land, acequias, etc. Well, we can't do that until we get the governors, or get the FEMA. I'm not quite sure of that, how the governor, when she makes the executive order, how we can proceed. And that brings me kind of to the last point where I felt very helpless walking out to the acequia and seeing no water at all at any place. And then talking to our mayordomo, Roberto Blanco, he was our former mayordomo. He said he had not seen that kind of flood in his 82 years hitting. And to repeat like a broken record, that rainfall, 99% fell on federal lands and then impacted private residences, state land, and county land. But that rainfall all was across the Mesa, La Mesilla there, and came down from the Lorenzo Arroyo all the way down to the Arroyo de la Mina. And I've been out looking at different places on our sequia and on the plaza, and seeing the damage that's just below Rachel's house. And while Norberto believes in all the heavy equipment coming in, Mark Lujan said, well, my people on the Pueblo, we do it by hand. And that's the way that many here remember doing it, cleaning out that mud, so you don't widen the ditches. Anyway, we're still contemplating and pondering that. One other piece of good news is that Paul Brashear, who's District 5 engineer with the State Highway Department, got his people out here. They blew out the culvert. It was partially blocked, like halfway blocked, right down the road here by the American Legion. You go by, you can see all of the sediment on the side with the bulldoze. Now the water will be accelerated through there and rush down to houses just below. And because we don't have anything to slow it down, should that flood event happen again this year and next year or 20 years from now. So I'm hoping for miracles, basically starting with someone showing up to say, and it could be me, I'm out there digging, I could do it 15 minutes, and then I got to take a 2-hour break. And then, you know, they're getting a little skip loader or whatever that David Rixby has available. Last time he helped us with that, the tread broke. So you have equipment issues when they were clearing out the San Lorenzo Arroyo, big piece of equipment they had there. So the transportation department broke. I had to bring the folks in Albuquerque. And so now, instead of being optimistic on that first Monday after the event, I don't want to say I'm pessimistic, but believing that the ditch can be opened by the end of this month, the end of next month, or before we close it on October 31st, well, I don't think that's going to happen. And it makes me sad. Really sad. We had a commission meeting here just a few days ago. There are individuals who said, look, we have gardens we've started, beautiful family gardens. We have our orchards here in the library. And then we have commercial growers from Matt Romero, Rick Goddett, and a few others. And we feel the pain collectively. Fortunately, I know that the houses that got hit, unfortunately, I know that they're suffering more. And then when we compare to what's happening on the other side, where it follows from, doesn't seem to be as bad. But nonetheless, I appreciate this meeting and an opportunity to share. And I'm hoping that with all of this, we can come up with a step-by-step process by which anyone, individual in our community or any community in Northern Mexico or an acequia will know who to call immediately. And then instead of reinventing the wheel or having one of you call one agency, you call another agency, I call the governor. somehow it all comes together, because if we could have a collective response that's done either through the library or through the fire department, that would be great. Because right now I know that a couple of the people who were hit hard, that we mentioned earlier, including Prudencio Blanco's house, they had no idea who to turn to. They really appreciated being taken out of the house during the flood, but where do you start? So when I talked to Angie Gonzalez, the neighbor, she would be passing on information regarding who to contact for them immediately, because they need that disaster resources immediately. They have wood floors, the dirt below, which was all flooded with at least a foot of water. You experience that as well in your buildings. So that's all I have to say. And again, I thank you, Paula, Serafina. I thank you for coming from the County Emergency Management on behalf of our Acequias. We're doing what we can as fast as we can, but it's not fast enough. Thanks.
Two programs. One was NCRS and watershed protection program, is that right? And what was the other one?
The other one is through the Farm Service Agency, FSA, and it's called the ECP, Emergency Conservation Program.
And that's for farmers.
That's what we're fixing it right now, preparing
Registered.
agriculture.
Okay, it's called
Top one is EWP, the second one is the ECP, Emergency Conservation Program.
And MBA can help people navigate those programs. So still more bureaucracy and cost shares, but still, they are options in there. Some assistance.
The thing about a lot of these, or like every program that I've had experiences with, and I think you're gonna agree with that, you know, is that they will pay for licensed contractors with equipment, but they do not help with labor, like the intel workers that we need to shovel out the silt from the effects. Are there any programs that will help with this?
I mean, the FEMA programs are unique from a lot of the ones we deal with state infrastructure. So as long as you're following procurement code, then there's a potential that yes, it will cover the labor for the debris removal part. All these programs are unique, so it's hard to speak totally in a global sense about them. And then things change along the way, so we have to be sure that it's your situation with the given proper regs in the moment that we're in. So it's hard to get a completely generalized situation, but there is a possibility when we talk about, I said FEMA, but I always use DHEM and FEMA individually. But I meant to say state homeland security, when you get reimbursed by them, there is the possibility that they're reimbursing labor. But again, there's, as Phil mentioned, there's a process, and we don't want to expect to get reimbursed if we're not kind of dotting our I's and crossing our T's. And we're still learning making sure we understand the guidance to give you to make that process as, I don't want to say seamless, but with as few hiccups as possible. So we're learning and we're trying to share. And as Rachel said, there's a need to kind of codify the greater body of knowledge as well. And we, Paula's basically, we're codified right now. And so we're learning together, and it's evolving. But I'm really excited about the possibility of doing this template on how we do watershed work. And NMA is really moving on. We've applied for some fairly large federal funds in collaboration with WERI, the Water Resource Research Institute at NMSU. And just looking at, we're applying for the River Stewardship Program, which I think your community is going to apply for next year. And we will find a way to find the right partners. But we will support you in that, to look at the bigger question of how do we slow and capture this flow of water in a way that recharges and brings beauty and doesn't bring destruction and pollution. And that is a potential multi-generational process that you all are starting, you started before this day, but we're kind of clarifying the urgency that Paul talked about that you're all seeing. And it won't be just holding those federal lands accountable. We'll be creating a watershed district, and we'll meet up with the folks who into an now hallway area where we're going to be doing the work to capture that silt. But it's a lot of more community volunteer opportunities. That's there's not just everything, but there's amazing work and a lot of funding opportunities. And once you start getting traction, I think it's amazing that you all are working on. We're here to.
Steve, and then Sylvia, and then Bob. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just, I have something in a little bit different direction, more towards Billy's question about help for individual homeowners. But I realize the discussion about the acequias is critical. I mean, it's critical to the whole economy and culture and everything in this area. So I don't want to interrupt that if people have a lot more questions related to that.
I think,
I don't want to steer everything else.
yeah, for sure. Okay, Billy just asked if we can set up a meeting with BLM and the community to discuss the arroyos. I have no idea how possible or feasible that is, but I don't see a reason why we shouldn't try. Okay, the library can work on that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really what's missing here is the BLM.
I know, I didn't either.
That's the problem.
You have to call the state office and because they're working next to 5-star burgers now, it's a small building. And they don't have the resources. And when Mark Luan came out and said, people will rattle around and calling our representatives, and they got a hold of the head of BLM in Santa Fe. And then it came out. So that would be probably a great place to start.
That's what has been around for quite a while. What's his name? Marcus Lamont? They're not in South at all?
Now they are.
Oh, but
They just moved offices.
right there in house. And
Yeah.
it's like so. I'm sure one issue is probably also the BLM is struggling as well as a department or, whatever.
Or service.
That is, one of the pieces that I think that I think about is other involved and
Could you get closer to the mic?
instead of a course about the history of the maintenance of the whole.
I'll repeat this back to you guys.
Preserve it and also writing dissertations and documenting and working with the shovel, and it would be a document about the whole process of it, and then we'd be involved. And so I would love to see something like that. And also working with the UNESCO. It could be really fun. Another thing, in terms of home, someone was talking about that. I think we're going to pound it over and over again. So I think as a community, we ought to think about our roots and how our roots are going to hold up. Mine are already starting to get weak, and maybe as a whole community, we can sort of address that because then there's going to be winter storms and summer storms, and the roots also are over our grain storage, and seed storage, and our homes. I mean, it's like. I think it's a pretty important thing. And the last thing I want to say is I want to really thank our fire departments and our safety association follow and the one that we have here again. But the thing of it is that, our fire department is really amazing. They're really very proactive, not waiting for the fire to happen. They just had a program now with Big Gorilla, where they go around and just all the branches, which I thought was fantastic. And so they put some really great proactive approaches. I think they but they really have to, they make the best, newborn.
So for the, I'm just gonna repeat, give a little summary of that, Sylvia, if that's okay for the folks that are on Zoom, and tell me if I'm misspeaking, please. So that was Sylvia, and she stated that, or she was kind of calling for involvement of the academic world, college courses, and an increase in the amount of research done on acequias, and maybe documenting history and their care and maintenance. She also was concerned about just like this, that we all pay attention to our roofs and to take care of our roofs that are on our houses. And then she gave a major shout out to the Dixon VFD, and thanking them for their proactive work and their tree chipping program that they recently began. I think we've got Steve wanting to talk, and then we have someone on the Zoom. Jennifer, I do see you. You will be after Steve. So Steve.
Yeah, so I'm Steve Jennison. I'm the district chief of the Dixon Volunteer Fire Department. And I just wanted to provide a couple of perspectives for the fire department's experience with flood. One is that I would like to give a big shout out to Delilah Jaramillo, the deputy fire marshal, who was here for us, came immediately when she heard that there was a major flood going on, was able to troubleshoot a number of things for us, including getting sand, getting sandbags, getting the county road maintenance people in to clear roads really fast. We had a major issue with a propane tank being torn off of its foundation and ending up partway upside down and leaking propane. And, you know, nobody really being willing to take responsibility for it, but she was able to troubleshoot that for us. That could have been a disaster. The other thing that I would like to mention is that in terms of the question that was raised about evacuating Dixon if it was necessary to do so, one thing I was seriously worried about during the flooding was that the second arroyo, which runs right by the fire station, was flooding to the point that it was impassable. And the bridge across the Embudo on 75 near mile marker 3, the water was already lapping up onto the side and was just about to flood over the top of New Mexico 75. If that had happened, Dixon would have been entirely, or the sort of downtown part of Dixon anyway, would have been entirely isolated really from both directions. There would not have been a way to seek high ground heading up to Peñasco. There wouldn't have been any way to head down to 68. So I know that this isn't a county issue, it's a state highway department issue, but it seems like the bridge over the Embudo at mile marker 3 on 75 really needs to be thought about because it has multiple vertical supports. When there's a big flood, large pieces of tree come sweeping down out of the Embudo box canyon and impact on that bridge. So I think that that needs attention. The other thing that I would like to mention, we had our hands full that day, and one of the reasons we had our hands full was that most of the major roads, as well as a lot of the county roads and private drives around here, were covered in this incredibly fine clay muck that was like grease. And so we were having trouble getting our fire apparatus up and down roads. In fact, I managed to get our brush truck stuck and had to, you know, and another shout out, don't tell him I said this,
But another shout out to a person I consider to be one of the individual treasures in Dixon. We had to get Wayne Archuleta to get his backhoe and tow our brush truck out of the muck. And then he also did a lot of rescue work throughout the day, getting down driveways that were flooded to people who were in trouble. So the last thing that I would like to mention is that I think it would be a really, particularly in retrospect, what I think I've learned from that event is that it would be really a good idea to have a sort of disaster management center where people could come. One of the problems that we had was there were questions as to whether any of the acequia head gates were open, because a couple of the acequias were clearly contributing to the spread of floodwaters. Not because the acequia gates were open, but because the arroyo flooding flooded into the acequias, and then the acequias spread the floodwaters. But we didn't know that. We didn't know whether there were head gates open or not. And we had a really, really hard time finding out any information about that. So one thing that I would like to propose that we meet about as a community is the idea of setting up the fire station, for example, assuming it's not isolated by being flooded on both sides. Set up the fire station as a place where people who have vital information, like are the acequia head gates open, can come and meet and provide that information. And also individuals who are going, oh my God, what am I going to do about the fact that my house is flooded, can also know that they can come to the fire station or call our phone number and there will be somebody there. That having been said, remember we're a volunteer fire department, so we are partly dependent upon who's in town. So along with being prepared to offer the fire station as a place to meet for disaster situations, I would like to know that there's a group of other volunteers outside the fire department who would be willing to come to the fire department and help, like answer the phones, or help with going to somebody's house and assessing what's going on with their flooding. Because the fire department we don't have enough volunteers to do that sort of thing. So that's all I want to say. Yes.
So what about fires? Like, what if there's a probability, a high probability that it's have a major fire? How do we know evacuation routes? Where to go to get respirators or information? We don't really have a formal network. So I think we have what it sounds like infrastructure.
Well, in the event of a fire, I would propose that we would do the same thing as in the event of a flood, that we would use the fire station as a central gathering of information place. But what Alfredo mentioned earlier about the Nixle system, I think that we would be able to get out information about evacuation routes on the Nixle system. So it's going to depend upon, other than that, hey, you need to go that way. There has to be some sort of way of disseminating that information. And I think the Nixle system is probably the best way to do that.
Who has been wanting to talk? Thank you, Steve.
Jennifer, you want to give it a shot?
Hi, friends and neighbors. Very humbled to speak after Steve. Thank you so much, Steve and Adam, for all that you do for our community, and also Wayne and all of the commissioners that I know have been working so hard on our acequias. I have been blowing up people's phones. My commissioners might not be surprised to hear that. And the information that I have received from a very kind gentleman named Justin Riggs at the Army Corps of Engineers is that the Army Corps of Engineers is the ones that come out to do the work on the arroyos themselves. They work with the BLM for permitting from the BLM to do the work, but that's where I'm at after hours and hours of phone calls. So I was hoping to pass that information on to you so that you don't like, because what I did was I got passed back from the BLM to the state engineer to the Army Corps of Engineers. It took me 5 days to get a call back from the Army Corps of Engineers. So again, the guy I'm working with, his name is Justin Riggs. He is not the one that works in our area, but he's the one who's been calling me back and sharing the information with me. So I hope everyone stays safe. And yeah, climate change is a hard thing to live through. And I'm very happy to be living in this community with you all through this, because I think we have an amazing community. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I wrote that down, and I think a few other people did as well. Yeah.
I'm Nancy Medina, and this happened a couple of years ago to us also. We had to contact Corps of Engineers, BLMs, and we went to a big, no one ever listened to us. No one ever listened to us. So as us as a community, we need to stick together with BLM, the Acequias, and Corps of Engineers, because no one ever listened to us. No one listened to us. We got a lot of damage on our property. Right now, it's all full of silt, and it's happened several times due to undereducated commissioner of the Acequia that named Doug, and went over his scope of duties to dig a channel to go to our Acequia and flood our property. So right now, this needs to be taken care of by you as a community to listen to what's going on. Because eventually I will lose my house due to what happened.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, I'm Alva Morrison, and I live down over here below Ruben and Jane Lovato. But I spent about the last, let me just say, in relation to the BLM, before my current career, I was a political organizer. And when you deal with the bureaucracy, they don't have an incentive to listen. So no wonder we have problems with the BLM, because they're not elected by us. So the only thing we can do is to go to our elected representatives. And that's the next step, I think, as far as the BLM, because that's the pressure point. They will do what our senators and congressmen say, because that's where they get their money from. Anyway, for the last 20 years, I've been with the Department of Energy Low-Income Weatherization Program and a whole bunch of different capacities. It's a great program, and it's historically been very limited in scope. And yes, it addresses energy use in individual homes, and that's a good thing from preventing more climate change, but it's like this much, right? It's a grain of sand. I'm in the capacity of a trainer right now for the program. So I'm watching the big picture, going around the different states and going to multi-state meetings and things like that. And what's happening with this program, especially there's going to be an enormous amount of money dumped into it, especially with the latest federal legislation that's being passed. And already I'm seeing in the overall directives coming from the Department of Energy and the ability to bring in other potential income streams to this program, that it presents the possibility of addressing individuals' problems with emergency damage that's occurring to homes. Already they're saying that, they used to, if your roof was gone, they tell you, okay, we're not going to work on your house because it's too much money, we can't replace your roof. That has already changed. They've officially said, okay, now we're going to dedicate specific funding to replacing all these roofs where we told the people, so sorry, let your house fall down. And they're going to go in and start doing that. The state also has the ability, and has in the past, put additional funding into this program. Now, to do what I'm talking about would require action on the part of the state legislature. But based on what I'm seeing here today, we have somebody who, would be willing to try to take the ball and run with that. that, and I'm sure they could get support from other places. But with that money, then we could have resources of professionally trained crews that could potentially mitigate individuals' flood damage. There are some examples of somewhat similar things in other states already. California has a program where proactively individuals that have health concerns from the smoke, from the immense fires that are going on in California, which we're, starting to see now here. We have a pretty good example of pretty close to what's happened in California. But they have a program where they will go in and bring air purifiers and respirators and provide potential relocation for health sensitive individuals who might be killed by the smoke from one of the big fires. So that's the kind of thing that I think we can start to ask for the state to look at through these programs that already have professionally trained crews and are already used to traveling all over the state, dealing with people that are financially in trouble. It's an income-based program. That part of it is getting more flexible also because there's greater need. But that is something that we can potentially ask for, and that other people might also potentially be asking for, that would actually do something at the broader level, and there would be good funding behind it. That's the U.S. Department of Energy Weatherization Assistance Program, or WAP. I used to walk around with t-shirts all the time, so WAP, people would be like, what does that mean? But, and if anybody has any questions, but that's one thing where it takes some organizing, obviously. Yeah. Yeah, that one. I don't know, you're something. Those programs are good. But 20 years is kind of a flat back.
We have another person who would like to speak. Before we wrap this up, I do want to share that there's a flyer that Ecotone created that has a list of frequently asked questions related to floods. Yes, Serafina is holding it up right there. It's like 3 pages long. It's got a list of possible resources for private homeowners and for acequias and other entities. They also have a survey there about their wetlands preservation project. I encourage you to fill it out if you have a minute. And then Bernie would like to speak.
Hi, I'm Bernie Ellis. 2 years ago, I sought higher ground by moving to Rodarte. I owned a farm in Tennessee that experienced 3 500-year floods in 10 years. One of those floods, I had 27 inches of rain in 24 hours. So again, I really emphasize the notion of climate change and what it's bringing. But Paula, I wanted to ask you a question. As these events occur more frequently, I'm wondering if MMAA or someone could mobilize the Pacientes and the other acequia associations to help. We weren't flooded in the Peñasco area. We've got half a dozen, acequia associations up there. If there had been a way to say Dixon needs help now, my guess is that some Pacientes would say, I have time, I can give half a day or whatever, and just mobilize more person power to come help. So, but I I do not encourage anyone to go through a 27 inches in 24 hours flood. Unless you have higher ground to go to. So. But I mean, what do you think, Paula? I mean, is that something NMAA could do?
Well, I think that's a wonderful idea. And it would be, when I was talking earlier about there's government programs and then there's us, the community, that falls in that latter category. Like, what do we do together and get into the data? And I think it's an amazing idea because the amount of manpower needed or even equipment and the needs that we need not accounting for FEMA or Homeland Security. I'd love to see that. And Sabina and I have talked about this for years about not just mobilizing for disasters, but even for like witch cleanings, having a workforce that you can tap, but certainly in disasters it's more acute and there isn't anything set up, but I would be willing to work on that. And the regional associations play a big role as well too, because that's the way that we communicate with the local sectors mainly is regional and then it filters out. It's both ways, but there's 20 some regional associations. And not all of us are affected at the same time. Something being from the burn scar and Mona and again, that's going to cost our minds too. Like, how can we tap the volunteer resources of the communities around us? There's actually a national model for this. It's called VOLAD, and it's called Volunteer Organizations That Aid in Disaster. And I've never heard of it. I don't know if anyone else has heard of it, but it's a national group. And whenever there's a FEMA disaster, VOLAD comes into town. They start figuring out, okay, you guys need this, this, and this, and they try to fill in the gaps where the government doesn't. So FEMA's a huge piece. So these religious groups like Mennonites, Methodists, they all come in, but we'll bring like vessels of people and we'll help you to breathe. And if we had a similar thing to MOAD, but for a second, that would be super powerful. Because right now, there's the focus is on individuals' homes, and I completely understand that. It's on roads, homes, and basic survival. But our sectors are so interwoven with that we shouldn't wait too long to take care of that. Mobilizing volunteer workforce would be huge step forward, and there's a model for it. But it would have a cultural kind of, we as Sekias are very accustomed to communal work, right? Because we all get together to set kind of session. And we know the story of San Isidro, that San Isidro was helped by angels so that he could go to mass and the angels kept working his fields. And so we need some, talked about it, calling it labradores de San Isidro, hoppers, or second angel, or something of that kind of concept for people on us, or their track holes or the bomb tracks or whatever. You guys are gonna fight for your life, we're gonna help for a couple of days. It'd be amazing. So I love the idea, and I think we should start planting some seeds.
I think that's something that we tried to start doing a little bit here at the library right after that last flood, and we had some success, but it was very small. And I think what we did was we put a call out for people who needed help, and we started a list of people who needed help, like cleaning out their homes or shoveling mud or getting their well fixed or whatever. And then we had a list of people who were willing to provide help. It didn't always mesh, but I think it was a start. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement there. And we are totally willing to take that and try and make it better and, you know, work with, does that mean we're working with the VFD or does that mean some other organization takes it over or whatever? But I agree. I think that the more we can help ourselves and help each other, then the better off we're going to be. We really need some sort of more formalized, robust way of doing that. Absolutely. Maggie.
I just want to say quickly, all of these infrastructure ideas and problems obviously are totally critical to the situation. But I just want to say as an individual, number one, thank you to Steve and the fire department for immediately coming up with some volunteers to help me. My house was flooded and my shed was flooded, and it was pretty overwhelming to see. These young people cleaned up the house in the day, and the next day some of my neighbors and friends came over and cleaned up the shed. So I am eternally grateful for that. It really made a huge difference. All I had to do is go around the baseboards all day, which was work because that muddy stuff is tough to get rid of. Certainly, thank you very much. The other thing is, as far as this emergency alert, I was in Santa Fe. Did you guys send one out? Would I have gotten one on this flood from 3 weeks ago that we're talking about, this massive rain? Was there an alert?
Specifically did, I know that National Weather Service did broadcast some alerts to that.
Okay, so if I was signed up, I would have gotten a notice. I was curious to know, because now that we people appreciate it, even though this is a surprise.
I would also just like to reiterate that I recommend signing up with an individual profile and not just your cell phone, because you will receive or have the ability to customize your account so much better than if you do just register with your cell phone. The easiest way is to go to the county's website, rio-riva.org. On the top, there's going to be multiple drop downs. One of them is departments. If you go under departments, go down to fire marshal or emergency preparedness, and under there you will see a link to click. One of them is a widget for Nixle. It's the easiest way to access the website.
Possible to work for establishing an alert system for every, let's say, a 423 phone number, 505-423 and 97579 753. You know, the area phone numbers that the county, would that be possible? We're just right here, and we'll know about that, but the rest not know about that. And it's very systematic. So would it be possible to work with phone companies, I guess, to establish that alert to come natural, to come to in a collective way to everyone? Because I get the alerts from WADA. My phone gets the alerts from WADA, and there's but watches, but I don't get them here. I never registered with
So
them.
the big reason for that, I'm assuming right now, I have to look at the specific alerts that you are receiving, but there's multiple different alerts. So the system that we use has 3 different alert types. So there's going to be what we call a community message. There's going to be an alert, or there's an advisory. Advisory being the highest and most emergent. In addition to that, we, as a cell phone provider, all of the radio stations you hear there issue what they call IPAWS alerts. IPAWS alerts are going to be sent out by the federal government or by agencies such as Department of Homeland Security, Emergency Management, and I know that most of the alerts that are advisories that have been going out are from Homeland Security, Emergency Management, for what I'm thinking is private type messages that you're receiving.
What happens if we don't have power? Like an example, when you go out to the lake and you have the emergency lights up there, because there's speed. You go out to the lake and you come short. There's something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's emergency warning systems. They can be put into places in communities for rising waters, different types of events. Again, I mean, an immediate fix to that is I recommend that everybody have a radio, an emergency broadcast radio.
Yeah, but if you have a power, something to get caught up on the battery, whatever, you know. That's always, you gotta have a power. Like everything's dark, you know, power goes out.
We've been here at Dixon one time, we were out power for like 2 weeks at a time. Back in '79.
We like some days, you know, power, little power, we pick up. What we do.
So Lou, would you put on the Sean Pryor direct link to the sign up for the thing? I think if everybody had that, because yeah, I like the one I get alerts that are from wherever, you know, Florida or Santa Fe or something. I said to Florida or something.
And those are going to be, like I say, I think those are the iPod alerts that you're also receiving. Or most frequently, I know in the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of them go out and those are Apple. And those, as an individual owner of a fund, you don't have the ability to disregard.
I have another just very quick question. I don't want to spend time on my particular situation, but I wasn't impacted by something coming down from Arroyo or anything. It was just the impact of the magnitude of the rain coming straight down. And it didn't impact my neighbors. So I'm just wondering if there's anybody out there, I have an idea of somebody I could go to that could just look at my property and say, well, yeah, this is what you need to do. Because, you know, to me, it's not so obvious. And understanding, appreciating that this may not be the last time. It would be nice to be a little more prepared. So anyway, but thanks again for all the help.
I want to thank everybody for coming. And if there's something that you think of or you're wondering about afterwards, feel free to reach out to us. We're going to try and share a lot of this information publicly, and we'll share the Zoom publicly for anybody that wants to, you know, listen to that. And I really am very appreciative to our guests that came out from our New Mexico Safety Association, from Rio Arriba County. Thank you. From Evra, from all of our safeties here locally. We have visitors from neighboring communities who care very much about our well-being, and this was wonderful. And I don't want it to be a one-off thing. We're talking to Ecotone about coming to do something to address sort of your question, Maggie, about what can I do at home? What are some things that I can do at home? It's hard to provide site-specific advice when they're doing that, but that might be helpful. We're also talking to Robert Templeton. He's doing a lot of work with the state, I think with the state engineer's office, to like learn more about our arroyos and where is that water coming from and what arroyo are we on, and just to learn, start to become more knowledgeable as a community about our watershed. And these are small steps that we can take. If there's something else, I think there are a couple more suggestions in here that I wrote down that I'm not remembering right now, but if there are other suggestions that you have, ways that
we can, other events and information that we can share, I want to hear them. Yes.
Yeah, I can't pass up that segue because the Dixon Community Fire Department, our 501c3, got a grant from the New Mexico Association of Counties to do the Dixon Fire District Community Wildfire Protection Plan with Ecotone.
Cool.
And so we will be having competing with Ecotone and the Forest Stewards Guild and the community in near future. So I would strongly encourage people to participate in that. Participate and volunteer. And put pressure. Yeah.
What was your grant?
Sorry?
What was your grant? I'm sorry. I'm writing
Oh,
it
it's
down.
from the New Mexico Association of Counties
Okay.
to do a Dixon Fire District specific community wildfire protection plan for the next year. It'll be a 1-year project. We're good. The brush chipping was awesome. Oh, that was amazing. Also, we got capital outlay money through the generous work of Susan Marietta to purchase a chipper for the Dixon Fire Department. And so we'll be, well, we don't have it yet, but when we get it, we will hopefully, what we learned from the chipping project that we did the last 3 weekends, hopefully we can apply to organizing an ongoing project to release.
I'm in line for that. I'll leave it.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you to our folks on Zoom. Really appreciate you sticking with us.
Can we stop by and pick up some of that paperwork?
I'm gonna put my ear to the speaker, Marianne. I can't hear you. What'd you say?
Can we stop by and pick up some of that paperwork that?
Oh, yeah,
you were-
yeah,
Okay,
absolutely. It'll be available here at the library.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.